For all of us, it's about predicting where the consumer is going and getting half of it right.
One of the things we want to do is create ads that don't suck.
Embracing change creates great possibility.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today. Today on the show, I've got Bill Tine, the Vice President of Marketing at King Arthur Baking Company. On the show today, we talk about his refresh of the brand. It's a 230-year-old brand, the process that he went through, the research and insights. And we also talk about the impact of the current months on his business and the explosive growth that they've had and how they've had to adjust. The company's recently seen a 153% increase in the number of pounds of flour sold, and calls to their baker's hotline. That's 1-855-371-2253, or BAKE as the last four digits, almost tripled between March and May of 2020 from the year prior. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Bill Tine. Well, Bill, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alan. Glad to be here.
Having the VP of Marketing at King Arthur Baking Company, I have this urge. I need to ask you, what's your favorite recipe?
That might be the hardest question I'm going to answer this whole whole interview. There's so many, but if I'd have to pick one, and I'm going to tell you two. Our no-knead harvest bread is one of the recipes I bake frequently. It's this awesome hearth bread that's got dried fruit like raisins and cherries and nuts in it. And then we have a cake, a Caribbean rum cake that is a holiday favorite that I love.
Those sound fantastic, especially early this morning. I haven't had a proper breakfast yet. I want both of them. That's awesome. Well, you seem to have an interesting path. I was looking at, your background and going from what looked like management consulting to publishing and media, and then ultimately to marketing at King Arthur. Tell me more about your path and your journey that you've been on.
It's been a somewhat of a winding journey. Early in my career, I had an opportunity to working at a consulting firm, and my main client for a number of years was actually NASA. And of all places, especially for a science geek like myself, it was really exciting. One of my major projects was valuing their assets in space. At the time, they had, I think, 32 assets in space that they owned. And that just is an interesting experience, both in terms of working with government and to some degree bureaucracy that falls in place, but also the anything is possible approach that I saw at NASA. From there, I actually went back to graduate school and got a business degree. And that was a real pivot in my career where I saw so many people and met so many people at school that had different experiences. And that got me to think, what do I want to do in a career? And media or entertainment was something I really loved. I ended up working in what I would consider enthusiast media, which ended up being food at the beginning, but then started to include other things like woodworking and home building and gardening. And I love the connection to the consumer and like what we are offering. Because I was working in food for quite a while, I met folks up here at King Arthur and over a number of years kind of developed a relationship and eventually found my way here, which couldn't have been better. I've been here for a little over 10 years and it's the favorite place I've worked so far.
Yeah. Well, the company has, I was reading about it, has just this tremendous history. I mean, it dates back to 1790. I think that makes it 230 years old. That's unusual, like it's not, and especially in America, right? I'm sure there's companies in Europe that are older than that, but that's an unusual age for a company to get to. And you recently launched a name change and a new logo and identity. And I'm just curious, why make the name change and logo change now?
Well, 230 years is a long time. I think one of the things, it's so long that we actually usually try to give a reference point. And so oftentimes I'll say that George Washington was in office when our company started, which is incredible. I think we're one of the 10 oldest companies in the country. And what's amazing is we started selling flour. And I think that's very unique that over the course of multiple centuries, we're still in the same business that we were when we started. So that puts a big weight on our shoulders. I think we have been a flour and baking company actually for a number of years. And we felt that it was the time to really make sure that we were communicating to our consumers that this is our focus. We're not expecting to broaden outside of baking. And we wanted to make sure that consumers knew that was our focus. And then also, as a platform to enable us for growth, appealing to a larger audience, wanted to make sure that flour and our name King Arthur Flour wasn't limiting us.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I'm curious how you thought about the rebrand while staying true to that long heritage and the values that the company has. A lot of brands I've seen over the years can potentially lose their way, frankly. It usually happens when a founder leaves, originally. You guys are long past that. But how did you maintain your heritage and values through that process?
Yeah, it's interesting because we certainly are past the founders, but we still have a big connection to our history. We are actually 100% employee owned now, but the fifth generation of owners actually still live in town, and they were the ones that sold the company to the employees decades ago. And their values are something that we still talk about. Brennan and Frank brought a lot to the company when they were involved, and the employees here still look to them and look to their what they left us with. And so that's something that we want to continue to carry on. We often say, hey, we're 230 years old and we want to set ourselves up for another 230 years. And that's the type of time frame that we think about. And so it's certainly something that weighs on us, and it makes a decision like this really important. I think one of the things that has been helpful to enable us to do this is our team's been in place for a decent amount of time. Our senior creative director, our head of creative, actually has been here for a little longer than I have. I've been here for 10 or 11 years. And that helps because we've built a lot of trust and understanding of who we are and what our history has been. And so that I think really set us up for success.
No, that makes sense. And not only the building trust, but also gives you time to really absorb and understand the brand, I'm assuming too, the ethos of it, if you will.
Absolutely.
Well, I'd love to geek out a bit, if you don't mind, and talk about the process you went through to start this journey, if you will, and any insights that you gleaned along the way. So, where did you start this process, if you will?
It's interesting. I'd say I've been here for over 10 years, and I think we've been talking about a change like this in terms of shifting to a baking company for quite some time. It was about 18 months ago that we actually committed to doing this project and started the wheels turning. But going back to something I just said, it really helped that our core team had been here working together for a while, because something like this, especially that involves a significant creative process, does require trust. And we are able to be very open with one another, so nothing's held back. We also have lived our brand for a number of years and know our consumers quite well. I don't think that limits our need for research. I think it actually instead gives us a better perspective on how to conduct research and what insights we need to pull out. And so that's actually one of the places we started is really diving into consumer research, making sure that we were looking at multiple consumer segments. This is a trusted brand with a lot of long-term customers, and we wanted to make sure that we are living and upholding their values and what they think of us, while at the same time, the whole purpose of one of the main purposes of the project is really to enable us for growth, growing our customer base. So we wanted to know and hear from consumers that aren't buying our brand, what they think about us. And that was really important in the process. And that initial research really set a baseline that we'd be able to come back to time and again to test throughout the process.
Got it. And double clicking a little bit, I guess, on the research you were doing, what type of research was it? Was it qualitative, quantitative, a mix of both? Just really trying to understand.
A mix of both. One of the things that really helps us is that we've developed this really great one-to-one personal connection with our consumer. It partly is because we have a strong direct-to-consumer business. Also, we have a really strong social media platform and programs in place like our Baker's Hotline, which is a free hotline where you can call and talk to a professional baker any day of the week. And those types of one-to-one connections are really helpful because doing research requires that type of engagement. So we did surveys of our current customers as well as potential customers. We also had one-to-one sessions, and then just also gleaned a lot of insight from data sets, whether it's social media responses or other data sets that we could pull in. And we took insight from all of those areas to really come up with what I would consider and what we labeled territories. Like, what are the target territories that we're trying to achieve in this process?
Was it, as you went through that and you were collecting the data, both qualitative and quant, was it a slam dunk? Was it like all lights were pointing in the direction you felt like was the best direction to move, or was there any tension in it? I guess I'm just curious.
I wouldn't say tension. I think for the most part, it was a lot of the insight was obvious isn't probably the right word, but it made sense. Some things that some of it we were expecting, some of it wasn't a surprise, but was something new that we heard that really made sense and quickly pointed us to the direction we wanted to go. And a lot of it was complementary in terms of customers or non-customers, what they were saying. Current customers certainly have a lot more history. And so that also turned up in the research that they weren't necessarily looking for a change all the time, but they were still establishing a baseline of what they felt about the brand, which was great. So that later on in the process, when we were actually showing them either potential designs or our final design, it was coming back to that research and making sure that we were coming up with the right approach.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. I think what I've found in my line of work as well is if you've got the right direction, the right orientation, it can be a fairly natural evolution. Obviously, there's little bumps in the road along the way, but it sounds like it was kind of a natural fit or natural evolution for you guys.
Definitely a natural evolution, but the creative process was challenging, and we knew it would be. And we fortunately picked a group. We worked with an agency, Little and Company, and Mike and the team there. Their process fit our approach really well. And one of the things that we really liked is that they had us participate from the beginning in terms of the original stakeholder meetings through design exploration all the way to selection. And I remember one of the pivotal moments was when our team was looking at some of the early exploration that they were doing. And we've sat in a room and looked at probably 75, maybe 100 different logo designs. And they were explorations, they weren't finished. And that helped us really narrow our focus. And that was important because we had a pretty good understanding of what we wanted to see out of a new logo. But if we hadn't seen such a breadth of options, I think we would have been left wondering if we explored thoroughly enough. And their process really worked for this because it is challenging to make this type of a shift. And I think when we came out of it, we were really confident we were making a good move.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'm glad it's went well. And I think with the recent success that you guys have had, I mean, I was reading we're living through this pandemic, overstated, but unprecedented times everyone keeps talking about. And it seems that these stay-at-home orders have been really, really good for your business with 153% increase year over year in pounds of flour you're selling. And I know just in my own house, baking is happening a lot more than it used to. How have you guys, adapted to that new demand, if you will?
Well, interesting. We actually are in a number of business segments, and we have I think what most people see is our consumer, what we sell in grocery stores. We have a food service business selling bulk baking products like flour to artisan bakeries, a lot of artisan bread bakeries. And so the stay-at-home orders was this huge shift in consumer behavior to eating at home. And so that clearly drove a lot of an increase in grocery store purchasing. At the same time, the other side of our business was potentially seeing challenges, although as it turns out, it's been amazing to see bakeries really get creative to make some pivots in their business, and we haven't seen it much of a decline there. And so we've been trying to look at it from multiple fronts because we do reach consumers in many, many different ways. I think the interesting part from the home side is that baking has become at times a new national pastime. It's something that people can really dive in, whether it's a meditative or stress relieving activity or an activity to do with their family and their children, or in many cases, something they want to, put their mind to and develop a skill. And that's kind of where a lot of times I lean back on my experience as in media and the fact that we're in this unique category that it's a hobby for people. And we've seen that a lot. We've seen people wanting to, really hone their skills, in bread baking or sourdough bread baking or pizza. Pizza's become regular occurrence. We have a pizza recipe. We have a concept called Recipe of the Year, and our current Recipe of the Year is a pan pizza, crispy, cheesy pan pizza that millions of people have hit that recipe page in the last 6 months. And the stories we hear are people try it and then over the course of the next month or two, make it multiple times each week because it really is a fun thing to do with your family, but also makes an amazing home pizza.
I'm going to have to try that recipe. I haven't tried that one yet. So
it's amazing. It really, it's an awesome, and even for a beginner baker, it turns out perfectly.
Nice. Well, you're adapting to these business shifts, these consumer shifts that are happening, just behaviors in general are changing during this time. It's also not an easy time. I can only imagine to keep a company going, right? Like a lot's going on in everyone's personal lives. There's virus circulating around the community. Was there anything that you guys had to do to adapt just to keep the business going as well, to react to the demands and shifts that were happening?
Yeah, I would say anything and everything. It seems, I mean, it was months ago. It seems like a lifetime ago that even week one, when the stay-at-home orders were put in place, we shifted over the course of a week to going from mostly an in-office environment to an entirely at home for the administrative staff. And that's really challenging for, certainly our flower operations team that is managing orders and the connectivity, VPN access, any kind of technology brought challenges, and our team shifted almost seamlessly. And so I would think some of those moves are maybe in hindsight are some of the most important, because we were able to bring our technology to all different places. But the emotional side is probably the other one, staying connected, supporting one another, because each of us individually is in a different scenario. It could be we have young children and we're trying to manage their schooling, or potentially our parents or grandparents, and we're trying to help them out because they're in a different situation. So each of us has a different need. And I think I've been excited and proud to be at a company like ours that has a culture that is just very supportive. There's also just like logistics, operations things that we've been able to do to manage this huge influx. And that takes a really strong team and a lot of creative thinking, because manufacturing facilities need to make changes. Adding second shifts was like theoretically doable, but then you had to find people to staff those shifts. And across the board, I think every single department here had to be creative and be quick. I think speed was definitely a big challenge.
Yeah, it seems like more folks that I talk to, there's kind of like two words that come to mind as I summarize what I've heard from other people, is like this exceptional need for additional focus and weeding out the things that are not necessary and focusing on the things that are most important. And then flexibility, right? Like flexibility to get the job done. And it sounds like you guys are experiencing the same type of success to do that, I guess.
I would absolutely agree. Yeah, that sums it up really well.
You talked a little bit earlier about just the engagement level of how you guys engage with your customers and your prospects. You get the D2C connection, Baker's hotline, and I saw a stat that you've had like triple the volume in the during the last few months to that Baker's hotline. How are you engaging with customers and prospects? Like, what are all the ways besides the hotline?
Yeah, so we've built up over years a lot of resources for bakers. It's really the core of our approach, that we want to help and inspire, and that'll help the category, and as the category grows, will grow. So there's a lot of things. Our bakers hotline, I think is unique. It's been in place for years, probably 25 years, and it's a free hotline. People can call in 7 days a week, and now it's grown to also support social. So it's a, you can call in the phone, but also you just, chat with us or send us a message through any of the social platforms. We staff that with professional bakers, culinary school trained or actual professional bakery trained. And that's important, because as people engage with us, they don't necessarily want to engage with a marketer. They want to engage with a baker. And especially right now, whether you're a new baker and you have a question, or you're really like honing on something really challenging, you can call and talk to a really seasoned pastry chef and get help as you're baking, which is important. So I think that's one of the more unique ways. But we have a ton of content that we've pivoted quickly. I would say one of the first things we did was pivot to create more content in different ways. We have multiple people filming videos on a daily basis in their home kitchens, and that's really helped. We launched an hour-long baking show called the Isolation Baking Show that aired every Friday for a few months with Gazina Bullock Prado and Jeffrey Hamelman. We are just finishing up a series called Bread School, where one of our head bakers, Martin Phillip, really goes in depth into some of the science and techniques of bread baking, and a number of different series and resources, a lot of it video, but also in written form as well. And those are things that people can get inspired by, get help from, and really see us as a resource much broader than just a product company.
I love all of those things that you just mentioned. One comment you made that I want to circle back on, because I think for marketers, this isn't always a logical move. You said, we're focused on growing, on category growth, and from there, our growth will come. Something to that effect. So that's a really important concept. I mean, folks I've had on the show that people will have listened to, like Byron Sharp, probably the most recognizable, who wrote the book How Brands Grow, Australian academic, focused on like, evidence-based marketing, would echo the exact same thing, with the data that he focuses on is focusing on the category, the things that drive that category, and trying to drive category growth and identify your own brand with that category is one of the most important things you can do to drive your own growth. So I just wanted to hit on that because I think that's a really vital perspective, if you will.
I think it's important because even if at times it feels challenging because you could potentially be lifting your competitors as well, I think inherently it's not, even though the goal is to lift the category, it's the reasons behind why the category would be growing, or why, for us, why we're getting more people into baking that's going to resonate with consumers, and they'll see us as that leader. And because of the positioning we have, we're in all cases, we're the premium product, we're the product that offers some of the best results, and we're the brand or the company that's going to be a partner with them. It really reflects well in when you're at that premium level. I think other brands that might not operate there could have a different approach, but I would still recommend that the category growth is still going to be your best approach.
Yeah, well, and I think what you just mentioned is where marketers get wrapped up, right? Is like, well, if I focus on the category, I'm going to help my competitors. And it's like, yes, but the goal is to distinguish yourself, not necessarily differentiate, although that could be a part of your strategy, but really just distinguish yourself from them such that you garner more of that growth than they do, right? Like it doesn't, consumers are coming to the category for their own needs and benefit. They're not coming to the category because you're there, coming to the category because they want to achieve some goal in their life, some basic need.
Right. It's definitely their path to the category, and also has a really good benefit that we're partnering with our retailers because they need category growth. I mean, they certainly love to see when we grow, but their goal is category growth. That's a good complementary benefit.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point too. Well, what advice would you have for marketers looking to either engage their customers or drive growth during this challenging time, if you will?
I take it from some of the success we've had that if you haven't already built your own audience that you can reach, then I would start there. This is a great time to do it. And most importantly, it'll enable you to extend your growth long after we beat this pandemic and the pandemic ends, because the ability to reach out directly to your consumer is really important. And then the other thing I would say, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, just speed up your processes. In normal times, I'd probably say this as well, but right now, consumer needs are shifting rapidly. Opportunities present themselves regularly, and whether it's product development or promotional strategy or messaging, speed to market is critical. And I think we're seeing that now as a massive shift to different versions of e-commerce, whether it's click and collect or delivery at home, and a shift in what consumers want and how they want to get it. And so I think, if anything, making sure that the marketing team is ready for that speed.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Well, I want to switch gears a little bit. One of the things we like to do is to get to know the person behind the microphone, as well as what they're doing on a day-to-day basis in their job. So one of my favorite questions to ask is, has there been an experience of your past that defines or makes up who you are today?
Certainly. Experience, I think personally it's people that have defined me probably more than experience. My grandparents, came from different backgrounds. My father's parents were immigrants from Italy, came over here at a young age and had to find their way. From what I've heard, my grandfather was apprenticing in a barber shop when he was 14. So certainly different labor laws were in effect at the time. But they worked hard to make a life for generations to come. And my mother's grandparents, lived a little further out in the country and had a big garden in their backyard, because that's what kept their family going for a long time. And I think that's important. Also just I ended up working at a baking company, and I look back and I find it interesting. And early on in my high school career, a new kid moved to town and lived near me, and we got introduced. We were both playing on our high school football team, and we became, really, he was one of my best friends growing up. And his family owned a bakery, and he actually lived above the Italian bakery for a lot of his years. And I look back and laugh at that, because if I was sick or if something was going on, he'd bring over, sfogliatelli, like a big box of Italian pastry for me. And on the flip side, he'd always come to my house because he never was able to get a brownie at home. Brownies were not part of like the Italian bakery repertoire. And he would come over weekly to get, my mother's brownies. And so I look back at just like the interesting effect baking had for me growing up. And I think a lot of those things are really interesting. From a work standpoint, I think some of that has also really defined me. I mentioned NASA, and working at NASA was just amazing. One of the projects I looked into was the Voyager probes, which I don't remember all the details now, but I think launched in the late 70s. So now they're almost 40 years old, and they launched with like a mission of a couple of years, and 40 years later they're still working. And the concept of what you can do if you put your mind to it's pretty amazing. And then I'm just thrilled that I eventually got into kind of this enthusiast category, whether it was media or a CPG company focused on baking. From the media perspective, I learned early on, the saying is that content is king, and you really have to be hyper focused on your audience. When I worked for a little while at America's Test Kitchen, which is a television show, and Cooks Illustrated magazine, and we'd survey customers after every episode or after every issue of Cooks Illustrated and ask what they liked about it. And we joked because they always mentioned vegetables and seafood. They always mentioned the healthy stuff, but they always bought meat and potatoes. And just that making sure that you really understood your consumer data and your consumer research was certainly a lesson I learned early on, which was great. And I'd say the last thing was every single person, especially managers, we all can remember, probably more so some of our worst managers, but the experiences of like a really challenging manager, or more importantly, hopefully the experience of just having a really supportive manager as my career has kind of progressed, is important to me, and making sure that comes through both in how I operate here, but also how my peers and other folks in the company operate.
If you were starting all over, what advice would you give your younger self?
That's a big question. Yes. From a philosophical standpoint, I think, especially now seeing what's kind of going on culturally in our country, being more proactive about being inclusive. I fortunately grew up in a community that equality was the norm, which is actually a great thing. And I think that's what we should strive to become. But the reality is that that's not universal. And I think it's upon all of us to be more proactive about making sure everyone's included, everyone has a seat at the table. And that doesn't mean just like making sure there's a seat at the table, but actually inviting people to sit down. I think it's just important. And certainly is on my mind a lot right now. And I think that's something I would make sure was a priority early on. And then also just explore, take advantage of every opportunity. I think I've done that quite a bit in my career and my life, but looking back at times, I'm like, I wish I spent a little more time doing this or that. And I think those two things really stand out.
That's great. This next question is kind of a silly question, frankly, but I've kind of liked where it goes sometimes. It's wondering if you've made an impactful purchase for yourself in the last, say, year, 6 to 12 months or so, of $100 or less, and what that might have been.
Yeah, it's a interesting bar for impact. Personally, I think every time I take my kids out for ice cream is impactful. So maybe that's it. But two interesting things. I think it's hard. Right now it's what's most recent and what's been an interesting purchase recently. Early on in the pandemic, I trying to help companies out here and there. I found looking for food that could be delivered to home. I found this great place, Friends Ranches, which is a farm out in Ojai, California, and ordered some, citrus fruit from them. And it was amazing. So from an impact standpoint, like, wow, that was really, incredible. And then this other thing, this is more technology. I recently just ordered something called a Loom Cube, which is like a little light to put on the back of your computer for video conferencing. And as I feel like the majority of my day is now in a video conference, that's got to have some impact. So I'll stick with those.
I like it. Yeah. No, those are reality today. Better lighting, yeah, or supporting businesses that have been impacted. So that's great. Two last marketing questions for you. I'll ask the first one. As a marketer, we tend to, I think, be observant and kind of students of what's going on around us. And curious if there's any brands or companies that you follow or causes that you feel like other people should be taking notice of.
Yeah, I think there's some brands that clearly stand out that we all follow. Folks like Seventh Generation or REI that I think really stand out from their purpose-driven approach. Two that I look at though that are smaller certainly, and folks might not know. One is Tracksmith, which is a running apparel company, and they have a really engaged running community. And I think their approach to that engagement with customers, their approach to product is just really there's a lot of good lessons to be learned. And then another one, which is a retailer, Uncommon Goods. They're an online retailer. They're out of Brooklyn. They offer this great assortment of curated merchandise supporting artists and craft, which is what their customers want. But they have a lot of programs that really make them a great employer and then a great company to purchase from. They give back a lot, and I think that's really important. And I think that's challenging from a retailer perspective. There's a lot of retailers that are almost agnostic of what they sell. Consumers are willing to buy it, they'll sell it. And I think Uncommon Goods just takes a different approach and really makes sure that they're offering curated approach that really means something.
Yeah, those are great examples. It's funny enough because Tracksmith, to your point, is a smaller company, but you're actually the second person recently that have mentioned them. So I think people need to go out and research what they're doing. Maybe I need to go talk to their marketer, frankly. But the Uncommon Goods, I like how you put that. It's the mix of what they're selling, but also the programs around it and the good that they're doing beyond just the retail function. There's another company I might put you onto. The CEO and founder has been on the program a couple of years ago, I think, at this point, but fits into your REI category, called Cotopaxi.
Oh yeah, I love them.
Yeah, you should. They just live and breathe their purpose, and they have great outdoor gear too. So like they're doing good and making good stuff. It's in my mind, it's like a mini Patagonia on its way. So
yeah,
we'll
I think from a consumer standpoint, I think they match up well with Tracksmith because they operate differently. They have a great community, but their design approach is very recognizable, and so they don't blend in. Which, if you can pull that off, is a great thing because people will know you.
Yeah, no, agree. Well, last question for you. What do you feel like is either the largest opportunity or threat for marketers today?
Let's tackle the positive first. So opportunity, definitely the ability to connect directly with consumers, whether it's with content through a direct-to-consumer channel or through digital media. The consumer's moving quickly. There's an opportunity to shift, they have opportunities to shift behavior and more opportunity to explore and find new things all the time. And what's interesting is I think they're more willing than ever to share, you might call demand, what they want. And if you can provide it, they'll latch on. And so I think that's a really big opportunity that we all have right now. Something that I think falls in between how you look at it, opportunity or threat, I would say technology is one of those big ones. I think oftentimes from a marketer's perspective, we've often looked at people as like, are they analytical? Are they creative? And I think in that sense, you need a blend at times. You need people that are both. And I think technology is going to become the same thing, whether it's understanding of privacy laws or the ability to connect a digital ecosystem or the ability to understand how e-commerce is really driven. That can't be something that your technology person takes care of. I think everybody on our team has to have a baseline understanding of technology, to whether it's to map technology to creative or to analytics and understand how to connect all that data. So technology, I think, operates between that opportunity and threat. And then the one threat I mentioned already was speed. I think, speed to market. If you can't react to consumer behavior at the speed they're operating on, then that's going to be a really real big challenge in the future.
No, I agree. Bill, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Really enjoyed the discussion. And I'm going to probably go on Cotopaxi's website right after we get off.
Awesome. Hi, it's Alan again. Marketing Today was created and produced by me. If you're new to Marketing Today, please feel free to write us a review on iTunes or your favorite listening platform. Don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends and colleagues about the show.
I love to hear from listeners, and you can contact me at marketingtodaypodcast.com. There you'll also find complete show notes with links to anything we talk about on any episode. You can also search our archives.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.